Computer.
There we go.
All right, perfect. The business of sports conversation continues, and our focus today is on college athletics. And we're fortunate to have one of the very best in the business, one of the very best who have done it for many years, couple decades, if we're going to speak frankly. But Tim Tessalone, formerly with USC in the USC Sports Information Department. Appreciate the time very much here today and sharing some of your knowledge and experience with our students.
Happy to be here, Jeff, and glad to see that you're kind of sharing your knowledge and other people's knowledge with the young students and get them out into the workforce and take over the world that we tried to set a foundation for.
Yes, training people to take our jobs in a fun little way. But Tim, 43 years with USC. One of the things before we even touch upon it is you also taught in the classroom, correct?
I did. I was for 6 or 7 years. I taught a sports PR class. I think it was the first one at SC. I kind of developed it and taught that class. It was a lot of fun. It was very challenging. The students were way smarter than I was, and I think it kept me on my toes. But I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed kind of again giving back and sharing whatever knowledge I had with them and help them get on their pathways.
Pretty rare for someone to spend 43 years at one place. I know at one point it almost changed career paths, but it ended up not changing career paths. But I would assume the word maybe fortunate, the word blessed would be a good way to describe your run there at the University of Southern California.
I really was blessed and just incredibly lucky. You know, I was a student at USC. Actually went to USC and wanted to be a sports writer. Started off as a journalism major, and after a couple years there, I had a sports uh, writing class, and I remember the we had a sports writer come in the class and talk about his life. And one thing he said was that young sports writers just become old sports writers, and that really kind of stuck on me. Going, that's not a very good ceiling or upside to it. So I took I said, let me explore around what else is out there to stay. I wanted to be in the world of sports, and I took a PR class the next year and just fell in love with the PR end of it because I was able to do what I love to do, which was write and tell stories, but also kind of do it from the other side of the sports writer side, do it from the team or the PR side. And so kind of went that path. Worked in the sports info office when I was a senior and had an opportunity to stay to get hired there after I graduated. They were expanding the office back then, and my boss said, "Would you like to join us?" And I turned it down because I wanted to get out in the real world, wear a coat and tie every day, and see what that world was like. And I had nothing lined up. Kind of laid on the beach for a couple months, and my PR teacher, the one that was so influential in my life, in that first class, called me one day and said, "Hey, there's a PR agency in town that's looking for kind of a junior account executive. Would you be interested in interviewing for that?" And I did, and I got the job. And I really had no idea what agency PR was all about. But I went and took the job, did it for a couple of years. We had all sorts of clients. We had paint companies, we had financial firms, we had restaurants, but we also had the Motion Picture Academy, which was the Oscars, and that was a lot of fun. And we had the Pasadena Tournament of Roses, which was not only the Rose Parade, but the Rose Bowl football game. So I was able to kind of keep my hand in sports a little bit. And as I said, I did it for a couple of years, and then the job that I turned down at USC opened back up 2 years after I graduated, and they called me, and I said, hey, I'd love to come back. And that was 1979. And I worked there until 2022. I was there 43 years. So my view of the world is very, with cardinal and gold glasses on. I know the USC world and the college athletics world, but that was kind of my focus the whole time.
Yeah, and a couple things there you touched upon. One is, I always like to ask our speakers a little bit about their background because, there's no one way to do this. There's no one way to enter this field by any means. So I hope people don't feel that they're constricted in any way by doing a certain way because that's the way they think it's going to be. And secondly, the other thing you hit on is very important, whereas just one conversation, one line from a guest speaker in a classroom. I mean, you know, you could, you could go back in your life and not remember anything else that maybe happened that entire month of your life, but that's a one takeaway. And that's something I try to stress here in these conversations. Probably the people who are watching this are the students are not going to have a 43-year career at USC, but if they can just take away, one, two, or three things that applies to them that, strikes the chord with them, that's maybe the most important part of this conversation. Would you agree?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's why I think it's so important for people getting into the profession to talk to as many people in a field that they want to get into. Talk to as many people as possible, just informational interviews. And I always tell people, get three ideas or three contacts or three whatever from everybody you talk to. Pretty soon, three becomes 33, becomes 303, and then you follow up on those things. Maybe it's three ideas on jobs. Maybe it's three points about, young sports writers become old sports writers, whatever it is. But that then really becomes a foundation for where you're going to go in life. Absolutely, you're right.
So for the students who are enrolled in my class this semester, they'll come to understand that my background is professional sports. I went to a small school in Thousand Oaks, California Lutheran University. Had a little interaction with the SID department, little interaction writing for the school newspaper, but my interest was always in professional sports, but now being back in a teaching capacity, being on campus again for the first time in a lot of years, you really get to understand that it's a really unique, special environment. It's a community more than anything.
Yeah, I think I can't speak about pro sports because I never worked in that business. To me, you're right that it's very much a family feeling. I think in colleges, I think a couple things that I've always stressed the advantage, if you will, about working in colleges is where you have one sport to deal with as in the pro level, we had at USC 21 sports. So, the fall we were busting our butt for dealing with football and all the fall sports. And just when you kind of get tired or burnt out or whatever with football, that's gone. And now you have basketball and all the kind of winter sports. And when you're just kind of burned out by that, now you get all the spring sports, the baseballs and tracks and tennises and golfs and all that. So you're always kind of circulating and getting something different on your plate. And I like that variety. We didn't, each person in our office handled maybe three, four, five sports. So you had a rhythm and a flow to it all and a pace. I think the other thing for me in college athletics is, the kids, they're very moldable, the athletes at that point. And they really listen to kind of your advice and what you have to say. I mean, these are 17, 18, 19-year-old kids most of the time coming up. So you can really mentor them, you can really educate them. And I always felt that was part of our job. And what we do is to help them uh, with their communication skills so that you're going to be an athlete for a limited amount of time, but the skills that you learn being an athlete, having to stand in front of a group of media people, having to stand up at a press conference, having to do a one-on-one interview in front of a television camera or whatever it is, those communication skills are going to serve you well for the rest of your life, no matter what field you go into. If you want to be a teacher in front of a classroom, if you want to be a business person in front of a board of directors, if you want to be a minister in front of a congregation, if you want whatever it is, you're going to, your communication skills are going to get broadened just by what you're doing at this level. And that's why at our place at USC, when I was there, we always felt that it was important for our kids to get in front of the media. to help them to they all want to get to the next level, to the pro level, where you are, Jeff. And when they get to that level, they have to talk to the media. They have to be on there. They have to be on and sharp, and they can't mess up. Whereas at our level, okay, if you say something that's wrong or whatever, you get a little bit more of a break, I think, as a college athlete than you do as a pro athlete. And so we always encourage them. That's okay if you mess up. We'll help clean it up a little bit for you, but I'd rather have you make a mistake at our level than at your pro level, because then it blows up on you. So,
For those who are not familiar with a sports information department, now obviously, things have evolved over the years. You've mentioned newspaper writers, at the beginning of the conversation. We'll touch upon a little later here the ever-changing, ever-evolving world of college sports, which
mhm.
probably will evolve and change just in some way during the period of our conversation here this afternoon. But for those who are completely unaware of a sports information department, how do you just sort of define the basics of it?
Well, we're the liaison between the media that covers USC athletics and our student athletes, our coaches, our staff, our teams. Our duties are numerous. Everything from media relations, making sure the media has what they need when they come and cover an event at USC, a sporting event at SC, making sure they have the stats, they have access to press conference, that sort of thing. We write the press releases, the media guides, a lot of the communications that come out. Nowadays, all the social media, a lot of that, and a lot of teams have their own social media teams, but still a lot of that comes out of the sports info or sports now. It's kind of called sports communications, actually. At USC now they've changed it to sports brands and communications, I believe. But other things that we do, it's providing guidance to our athletes and coaches and staff when they have to deal with the media, educating them on the proper way to do that, backgrounding them on interviews that they're going to have to do and what topics are going to come up and how to best deal with those topics. Um, shoot, preparing kind of press supervision at games and at events. It's pretty all encompassing communications, public relations, publicity role is what it is. A lot of keeping historical files, keeping stats. And that's what I enjoyed. Like I said, I was able to still do some of the writing, the press releases, the media guides, what have you, but also get involved in a lot of other things. And the thing that people have to understand in this business is it's not a 9 to 5 job. You work when the teams work. And most often you're working when your friends aren't working because most sporting events happen at night, on weekends, and on holidays. And so when at USC, when we were there during football season, it was 7 days a week. So from August until hopefully sometime in January, we were 7 days a week. Basketball season was 6 or 7 days a week, and the spring sports, depending on what, it could be five. So we had a very small window, maybe parts of June and parts of July, where you could take a vacation. But so you had to have a very understanding family, spouse, partner, whatever, and you had to really be able to budget your time and balance your lifestyle and all that sort of thing. But it was a blast, and you rode the same merry-go-round or waves, up and downs as a team. And when they won, you felt great. When they lost, you felt crummy. But what we had to do is, as we had to stay kind of in the middle. You couldn't get too high or too low because you'd either get gray hair or lose your hair. Oh, so
USC obviously a national powerhouse, sports and everything else that it's known for. I mentioned earlier that I went to California Lutheran University. I grew up in Lompoc, in which the nearest college was UC Santa Barbara. The role of the SID at Cal Lutheran, the role of the SID at UCSB. Um, I would assume you're going to answer with the responsibilities and the roles are very similar. You know, whether you have 30 people from a media standpoint or two media people in the standpoint, more or less, will you see the roles the same?
Well, the duties are the same, but I always admired, SIDs at small schools because they had to do it all. It might only be them. And I always like to, if not hire, interview people from small schools because I know that they did it all. They did photography, they did social media, they did five, 10 sports by themselves. That's why minor league baseball is such a great job in a sense because you have to do it all. You're going to be taking tickets and you're going to be taking, doing promotions. You're going to be doing marketing. You're doing PR, all that kind of stuff. So to me, that was, the small school aspect of it is always impressive. Now, the other side of the coin is the big school. You usually have football, and football can kind of at the college level can really be the 450 pound gorilla that you've got to sit there and every day it's right there, and you got to deal with it because football is a 365 days a year sport now. It's the big money maker. It's the one you have to pay the most attention to. It needs the most attention, all that sort of thing. So at a smaller school, even if they do have football, where it's not as kind of a national focus as it is at a USC, that's the big difference, I think.
I don't want to ask you how you think you would adapt to the modern college athletics landscape. You know, this is the NIL era and a lot of other things, but maybe I want to phrase it. Would you enjoy working in today's college athletics? You know, it is different, obviously. You know, you had a 43-year career. You were a student at USC before that. You know, that's a 50-year canyon, so to speak. But talk about the here and now. Is this something that you would find as attractive as what originally brought you into the industry?
I think the biggest thing that is missing nowadays because of so much roster movement year in and year out with the transfer portal, and kids chasing the dollar through all the NIL and rev share money that's going on out there, is you really don't get a sense anymore of that family, whatever, growing up with kids from sophomore till they're senior, or to freshmen till they're seniors. They come for a year or two and then they go somewhere and then they go somewhere else. For example, I went to every USC home game this year and I went to a couple road games, and I still follow the team pretty closely. But I watched the bowl game, game 13 this year, and I needed a roster because I so many of those kids were new this year that I still hadn't figured out who's who, after game 13. Whereas it used to be number 37 was all, I knew 37 for the last 3 years has been so and so, and number 60 has been so and so. But now those guys, they change all the time, and I think that would be the hardest thing. I think it has the business has changed a lot. That the storytelling is being done now through social. So you have to be very skilled at telling your story and getting your message out on all the various social platforms. Kids these days, that's what they grow up with and live with. So that isn't a big deal for them. For us older guys that didn't come through that as much. Fortunately, we had people that were more fluent in social media, if you will. But you have to, if you're going to put out a press release that, hey, we just hired Coach Jimmy Smith, you have to write it in a press release. You have to tweet it. You have to Instagram it. You have to put a YouTube thing out. You have to have graphics for all your social media stuff. So it's done way differently than just the press release and the press conference these days. So.
talk about the football program. You're going to have high profile players, high profile coaches. Some love the media, some do not love the media. It's just like in anything else. We have a classroom with 25 students here. Five people might be very active on social media. Five would want nothing to do with it. And then you get a lot of people in between. Was there any did you first and foremost see your department as a service-oriented department to the media, yet at the same time, you know that the media doesn't sign your checks, the university signs your check. So how did you work that? And there's no, one way to do it with, because you're dealing with a lot of different personalities, but people who liked the media, people who avoided the media, and you're kind of caught in the middle.
Yeah, well, yes, I always felt that we were a service, that we provided a service and needed to provide a service to the media to give them access. That's what they want and need. And I was always very fortunate that my athletic directors, my coaches, um, understood that they were one at a place like USC, which is a major national brand, if you will. They're in the second largest media market in the country in Los Angeles. And that USC has always had a reputation for being media uh, friendly slash cooperative. And I think you could ask me to the times that we were there that we were pretty good that way in terms of giving that access and giving that cooperation. Because I think our coaches understood, and we tried to educate them what the media's role was. The media isn't there to be a cheerleader for you as much as you wish they were. Hey, Trojans are great, blah, blah, blah. But if we win, they're going to write great stuff about you. And if you mess up, they're going to, their job is to report what happened. Um, and this is LA. This is a very professional media, group, whether it's print or TV or radio or whoever it is. So you know, you have to be able to handle that. We had a few coaches over the years that were not media friendly, made our job a lot harder, but by and large, we had so many great coaches. I mean, I could go on and talk about John Robinson and Pete Carroll, who love to have the media around because what the media is not your enemy. They're one of your constituents. They're just like your donors, just like your faculty and staff, just like your recruits, all that sort of thing. So you want to treat the media. Our philosophy is always the better you treat the media, the better chance you have of them treating you well. Doesn't guarantee it, but it might be that just, hey, Jeff has been such a good guy to me. He messed up on this. Um, so we got to write this, but maybe we'll shade it a certain way because we like Jeff. We're not going to be as hard on him as we could. We'll be hard on him, but not to the degree that if he was a real jerk, that maybe we would. So that was kind of always our thing: is the better you treat the media, the better chance you have of them treating you well.
And how much could you put forth your own rules? And what I mean by that is now USC, for example, is in the Big Ten, and before that it was the Pac-12. I assume each conference has different rules in terms of accessibility, availability, of things of that nature. So you have to follow what first? I guess NCAA rules, the specific conference rules, and then at that point, is it up to the school and a sport by sport to determine what else can be accessed?
Well, unlike pro sports, where the NFL can come down and say, okay, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, locker rooms are open. At the college level, it was up to each school, each team to decide. And again, it was I would really work with our coaches and try to impress upon them the importance to be accessible and to provide access to the media to you and your players. It'll serve us way better. And generally, they agreed. And I mean, again, I use Pete Carroll as an example. I mean, we have media at practice every day. Pete talked to the media every day. Our coaches, assistant coaches, and our players were always available to the media. Now, there's a little more structure and control, I think, going on at a lot of places now. Not to the kind of the openness that we had, but they still provide access. They just do it a little more regulated. But it's not, to what you were saying, it's not done by conference rule. It's really school by school. The thing that the conferences are instituting are injury reports. So now that has become kind of standardized. But each conference is different. So when you're playing a non-conference game, do you go by the Big Ten's rules or do you go by the SEC's rules, on injury reports? And a lot of that can have an influence on coaching decisions on, and how you prepare for a game. So that's a little different. But yeah, I kind of wish I wish it was more standardized across the country, like a pro league. I always pushed for that, but didn't make a whole lot of impact that way.
You know, 54 national championships, your time there, 300 Olympians, 225 guys drafted in the NFL, five Heisman Trophy winners. But then there's the bad things that happen, right? We call this crisis communications. And last I checked, there's not a handbook for crisis communications. You know, what jumps out at you there in terms of maybe those one, two, or three things, irregardless of what this issue is, but if I at least focus on maybe one, two, or three things that are always going to kind of be part of that recipe when, we are hearing from the media or we know we're about to hear from the media
Yeah.
when something quote unquote bad happens.
Yeah, well, expect the unexpected always, 24/7. Especially nowadays, you really, the goal is always to try to stay ahead of the story and be the first one to put the message out. So your message is out first before the media finds out about something negative. But it doesn't work that way very often. It's usually you're reacting to something that's written in the paper on online or whatever. So you're kind of chasing the message. Um, but don't lie. Be timely. Be as open as you can. Nowadays, you tend to get a lot of your messaging from lawyers, what you can and can't say, but you have to kind of have a great relationship with your legal counsel, your general counsel, whatever, to make them understand that you can't just speak legalese, you have to speak plain English. So when you're coming out with whatever message is, that it's sounds workable. Um, but I always said that in a crisis, you just have to always stay on top of things. You have to watch what's being said and written during that crisis. You have to react quickly. You have to hammer your message. Continue that. You might call me and say, "Hey," or email me and say, "What about this?" And I'll give you the thing. And then 10 minutes later, somebody else is going to call me, and then I'm going to give them the same thing. And then somebody else is going to. And each person that calls or checks in with you, that's their first contact with you. So you got to be able to be just as strong and pronounced and accurate and complete on whatever your message is with the fifth and 10th and 15th person that called you as the first one, and stay on point and all that. And you can't get flustered. You can't get frustrated. Bad things are going to happen in sports. Somebody's going to get arrested. Somebody's going to get fired. Somebody's going to get in trouble. You're going to lose games. You're going to whatever. And as much as winning happens, bad stuff happens, and that's I mean that's in all of life, but particular in sports. And in sports, sometimes it gets magnified because, sports has its own section in the newspaper, its own section on television newscasts, its own websites, all that sort of thing. It's not like it's accounting. Nobody, there's not an accounting section in the LA Times or on the CBS News. So anyway.
Campaigns, storytelling. We mentioned earlier you have 5 Heisman trophies, during your time there. Um, Maybe there's a kid who's on the golf team that no one's ever heard of and has a great story. How much, in your experience, did you and your department spend on promoting players? Again, I use the word like campaign when it comes to Heisman Trophy winner, slash, that third string soccer goalie who has an incredible story, and you'd like to tell that, and whether that's inside, here at USC and or with the general non-university media.
Yeah, that was a huge thing for me. Is I always said, take the helmet off the football player, take the cap off the water polo player, take the baseball hat off the baseball guy, and find out what that person. Everybody has a story. Okay, I could sit here, Jeff, and talk to you for 30 minutes, and I'm going to find out something about you that is going to be unique. You might have a famous relative. You might have invented something unusual. You might have overcome adversity. You might have, there's something unique about you. And so the most important thing for us to do that I would tell my people is get to know everybody on your team as people, not as players, but as people. I always tell the story. I remember that we were playing Notre Dame. It was the day before the game. It was back in South Bend. We had gone to our Friday practice, and we were getting back on the buses to go back to the hotel. And I just jumped on bus 2 or 3, whatever it was. There was an open seat in the middle of the bus. I was sitting next to a linebacker kid that I didn't know very well, Gerald Kavanaugh. And we were driving back and just pleasantries or whatever. And he looks out the window. It was kind of a gray, dark, cold October day. And he looks out and he goes, God, this reminds me of the being on the kibbutz in Israel. And I said, what? You grew up on a kibbutz in Israel? Tell me about that. And he was in the military and all this stuff that we didn't know anything about. But that developed into an incredible story that we were able to tell about him. He played a little bit, but it still became a great focal point. And it's that kind of stuff. It's the stories behind the player that I mean, we've had so many cool, fun stories at USC. I mean, I always think of Jake Olson, the blind snapper, long snapper, the kid that literally didn't have eyeballs. He had cancer in both eyes and had to have his eyes taken out when he was a teenager. And he was a big USC fan and used to come to our practices. And the day that he was getting his second and last eye taken out, the day before, he said, the last thing I want to see is USC football, and go to a practice. And he came, and it was such an emotional thing. And then a couple, 3, 4 years later, after he played, learned how to snap blind, through, he had a coach that taught him how to snap a football. He ended up coming to USC, walking onto our football team as a kid that couldn't see. We had a player that would bring him out to the field, and then he got twice in 2 games, blowout games. At the end of the game, they let him snap, and perfect snaps and kick the thing, and it was just a hell of a story, but feel good, heartwarming. It's those human interest kind of stories that you want to find, you want to tell, and those type of things really go a long way. And I think as a PR person, the important thing is not only to find those stories, but to find who in the media can tell those stories. Like we would always try to find for Bill Plaschke at the LA Times a great Thanksgiving Day story. That people could feel very good and thankful for that about this young kid. We had a kid from from East LA that would come to all of our practices and kind of be the unofficial water boy at the team practice. And it meant so much for that little guy, Ricky Rojas, to come to be around our players. And, it turned into a really cool Thanksgiving Day story for Bill. Maybe you have a real visual story that fits for somebody in on the local news, or you have a great photo op type of thing. So you got to be able to match the great story with the media.
Um, Similar or somewhat along those lines, women's sports, girls in sports. I'm not going to ask you how that's changed over the last 50 years, but it's changed. It's different. And is this something that you saw in your chair slowly evolve? Did anything you pinpoint where, something really changed? How did it become a focus at USC in particular?
Well, I think we were always lucky at USC. We had kind of a pioneer in Title IX back in the 70s, Barbara Hedges, who was our women's sport administrator or women's athletic director, if you want to call her that. But she really guided USC's women's athletics into a kind of a forefront. And we've had incredibly strong women's sports programs across the board, whether it's track or basketball or volleyball, or lots of championships in that. So, I mean, women's sports at USC, I don't know, it's part of our sports program. They're just as great as the men's sports and just as compelling stories, and get treated equally, and all that sort of thing. And again, we've been very lucky to have so many championship level athletes there, so many Olympic caliber athletes, women and men. That's the thing is in LA, if you're not the Dodgers, the Lakers, SC football, UCLA basketball, and now the Rams, I guess, it's hard to make a dent in the media landscape, right? To get some coverage or regular. So you have to find those stories, and you have to, you've got a great women's beach volleyball team. How are you going to get them coverage? The media is not going to come out and report their results that they just beat Pepperdine, they just beat Northridge. But there's probably some kid on that team that's got a great story that you can get into the whole beach volleyball angle by telling that kid's story. And if you're in a small campus community, a campus town, I always remember one of my first road trips. When I first started, we went to Eugene, Oregon, and I remember getting off the plane in Eugene, Oregon, and I bought a couple of local newspapers, and across the front page of the Eugene Register Guard back then, it was in big headlines, Oregon wrestlers defeat Puget Sound. It's like, wow, the Oregon wrestling team has a banner headline in the local newspaper. We're lucky to get the scores of our Olympic sport teams in anywhere nowadays, and back then it was very rare too. So in a major metropolitan city like LA, you're competing with so many different teams, and not only college but pros, that it's a lot different if you were the only show in town, like in a campus town.
As we wind down here, some last couple of questions, very focused for the viewers here, trying to put ourselves back in their position. No need to wait to that junior year, senior year to get internships, anything along those lines. So, how do you see someone breaking into the industry now?
Well, yeah, the dreaded I word internship, I think, is such a valuable thing to get going, get involved. It doesn't matter what it is, just do something. I always said there's the sports bubble, and there's two people. There's people that are inside the bubble, and there's people on the outside looking, wanting, wishing they would get in. If you're in the bubble, one, you're getting experience, you're learning, you're meeting people, people are seeing how you do things. You're standing around the water cooler and interacting. learning through osmosis how your coworkers work. You're hearing about jobs, you're hearing about opportunities. You're on the outside, you're missing all of that. So whatever it is, it might not be your ultimate uh, thing that you want to do, but get inside, get involved in that bubble, and it'll lead you to a lot of things. It's this profession in so many ways. It's not only what you know. Yes, it's important to take Jeff's class and to learn all that kind of stuff, but it's equally important not only what you know, but who you know, so that you have connections, let's say in the media. Who do you know in the media? So I can pick up the phone and I can call Bill Plaschke at the LA Times and say, hey, Bill, I have a story idea for you. And one, Bill will listen to me, and well, one, he'll take my call, and two, he'll listen to me, and whatever. I might have to pick up the phone and call Kirk Herbstreit at College Game Day and say, hey, here's an angle for you, or hey, I disagree with what you guys said, and here's why. And we can have a civil conversation and all that. So you want to be able to have people answer your calls, answer your emails, and all that sort of thing. And that's all based on the relationships that you've developed with those people. It's such a relationship based business in what we do in sports communications these days.
And also, I'm always been a big advocate of you got to see the big picture. You might not like that story on a Tuesday, or that radio interview on a Wednesday, but the media never ends. It's 24/7. So that person that your coach or you or your player might be mad or disappointed in on Tuesday, they're going to be there Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and at a certain point, that newspaper is going to be somebody under somebody's bird cage, and because that's the thing. Like the story, it's just the industry never ends. And is that something you try to get across when maybe, the coach is mad about a story he read, or a player, heard that Kirk Herbstreit said something about them? Again, just trying to take a step back and look at the big picture and not the here and now so much.
Yeah, it doesn't, getting in feuds with the media or boycotting the media is not going to help you in the long run, because as you say, they're not going away. You have to work with them. Again, they're one of your constituents and you need to treat them that way. Um, the other thing is, on a bad story, make it a 1 day story. Don't drag it out. Don't make it a 2 or 3 or 4 day story. Get it out there, get your side out there, and make it a 1 day story, because tomorrow something else is going to happen. Some other news is going to hit. And, to me, that was always our goal is okay, this is not going to read well, but let's make it just not read well, in today's paper or tomorrow's paper instead of the next one. So,
And finally, even though you're in and around this, was in around this every day for so many years, never for you to be part of the story. And also, we've been very fortunate to have had these careers, to have these experiences, to, put a roof over our head by watching and getting paid to go to games, knock on wood. Um, I've always been very much a voice of do not let this job define me, even though very fortunate, very lucky, but it can also end, very abruptly and very quickly. And then what?
well, yeah. Don't be part of the story. Absolutely. The PR guy should never be in the picture, should never be in the background, should never be. We used to get, we'd get on our people if they were in the background of a photo. And those guys would give me crap, because when we had a coach, Lane Kiffin, who good buddy, but Lane was always one with the media that if you saw TV interviews, I was always in the back, because I had my hand on his shirt, waiting for him to say something stupid, where I would then tug on him and get him off, get him right. But Lane, we laugh about that. But yeah, don't be part of the story. And as far as defining you, I think the one thing, Jeff, that I would say is you have to realize that okay, Jeff or Tim, you're representing a, a team or an organization or whatever. And so it doesn't define you, but that's who you are. You're the PR person for SC. And you have to remember that 24/7. Even when you're down having dinner Friday night somewhere, or you're playing golf somewhere off, when you're not working, you're still that PR person for USC. So just like your athletes and your coaches, you better be smart on what you're doing because eyeballs are on you. And so yeah, don't let it define you as a person, but understand that you are that representative, the PR representative for the team. And so you're always on. You're always on.
College sports has been our topic, the business of sports conversation. We again thank Tim Tessalone very much for his insight and his time. And again, Tim, we thank you very much as always.
My pleasure, and best of luck to all your students, and happy to see that they're involved in taking a class like yours.
And as you say at USC, how do you typically end a conversation, Tim?
Hey, fight on.
Good stuff, sir.
Good.
Outstanding. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. You
We'll
doing
be
good?
viewed up and down the west coast of I, I'm at let's see, USC, Cal Lutheran, UCSB. I'll probably be like at Humboldt in about 6 months, and then I'll be like maybe Anchorage. And just keep going north.
Hey, it's really a cool thing that you're doing, and